watching this video here, we're all kind of getting a bit giddy because it's past 3 o'clock in the morning here in Central Europe.
And see, I slept late, so I'm full of life right now.
Yeah, I see Jordan's doing fine. He's on bus.
Yeah, I'm doing fine. I'm on a roll, so.
He's on at any time. He's just about ready for lunch. But you said that you wanted to tell some more reptilian stories, and one of them is a staggering one, which you did tell in your September 2009 interview. And you said you had more. And
oh yeah.
These are significant, in my own opinion, because of what you yourself said in the September interview, that it's actually quite important to rescue David Icke from being lampooned as the only person who's, quote, inventing all these stories about reptilians, and you know that these are not inventions, and you have heard many of these stories.
I've heard these stories as far back as 1959.
And you even brought some of the stories to his attention.
That's right. I brought some of these actual stories to his attention, yes.
And he was very courageous in coming forth very publicly to make this into a...
And I think I even said that. I said that on the stage up in San Jose when David was speaking, and I was too, at a conference. And at the end of the conference, there was a question and answer, in which David was on the stage, and I was too. And I said at that conference, I said, I am totally committed to the fact that there are reptile aliens here on the earth. Of that, there is no doubt in my mind. But it's not because David Icke is saying so. I've known this long before David Icke ever came into the picture. Many years ago, I have had many different stories told to me by very powerful people, people who are well-grounded, highly intelligent, well-respected people over the years have told me of their personal one-on-one encounters with reptile aliens. I have to believe when that many people, that well-grounded, intelligent people tell me things like airline pilots, bankers, real estate executives who are telling me their personal one-on-one experience with reptile aliens, I have to assume there must be something to it.
Well, it's very good of you to publicly take some of the pressure off David, because David has been ridiculed for this, so let's all be ridiculed for this. More people will come forward with their stories.
There's no doubt in my mind that they are here.
It's one of the most important stories on this planet right now, and people need to know, whatever the truth is. People need to know. And I'd love you to tell some more stories which you believe are authentic, that have been reported to you, to add to the chronicles.
I was doing a radio show. I was being interviewed on the Lou Epton show in Las Vegas many years ago, quite a few years. I'm thinking maybe 89. I think it was 89 or 88. So we're talking quite a few years ago. And Lou Epton at that time, dear, dear friend, Lou Epton, I love him dearly. He was a very, very wonderful man. He's still with us. He's in Las Vegas, retired. But he had a major top show in Las Vegas during the morning talk show. I have one at nighttime talk show. But but I was in Los Angeles, and Lou called me to do an interview, and that was a 2-hour show, and back in '88, I think it was. But anyway, in the process, I brought up the subject of the reptile aliens, and my belief about the reptile aliens and what the ancient peoples of the ancient world, the Babylonians, the Sumerians, the Phoenician Canaanites, the Egyptians, especially the Sumerians, all the ancient peoples of the world talked about the reptile aliens. And so I just brought that up in passing, that I think that there are reptile aliens here. I've heard too many stories, and then I told some of the stories that I had heard. Well, after the program, I got a phone call from a guy who later on I found out is an extremely wealthy businessman in Las Vegas. He buys and sells hotels and commercial properties in Vegas, and he was the biggest there. And he said to me, he said, Jordan, we listened to Lou Epton. We loved Lou Epton. So in the office in the mornings, we listened to Lou Epton on the show, and he says, but this morning when you came on, we got so interested in listening to you that everybody just kind of quit work for a little bit and was listening to you. And he says, and when you mentioned the reptile aliens, it shocked us. And he said, I'm a Christian, and I have 5 men who work for me in my office, and they're Christians, and they all belong to the same church. We all go to the same church, and all 6 of us are in the office, and we were hearing you today. And he said, when you mentioned reptile aliens, I had to call you and tell you, we're Christians, but every year we go somewhere in the world on vacation, and my company pays for everything. And he said, so I take, and all 6 families go together on a vacation somewhere. And he says, and last year, now this was like in '88, so he's talking about '87. And he said, last year we decided to go camping for a couple of weeks in Colorado. And he says, we were up in the mountains and we broke camp one morning, and we walked up to the top of this mountain. We were almost there anyway at camp, and then the next morning when we broke camp, we walked up to the top of the mountain to look over the lay of the land. And he says that out in the valley, we could see that there had been an area that had been cleared away. It was like a round area that had been cleared away. And there was a circle of people out there, and they were all wearing robes, and they were all holding hands and swaying back and forth, singing or chanting. You could barely hear them. But he said, but it was very quiet where we were. We could see that there was some kind of a ritual dancing or swaying back and forth in a circle. They were all holding hands. And there was obviously somebody in the middle, like a priest or something in the middle. And he said, this is out in the middle of nowhere. That these people are here with this thing that they're doing. And he said, we're up here in the mountains looking down on them. And he said, while we were standing there looking at them, all of a sudden, a second figure popped up out of nowhere. But it was bigger than the man that was in the middle. It's in the middle too, but it's much bigger. And it pointed up at us. And he said, and all the singing stopped, everybody stopped and pointed. And he said, we knew we'd been had. And he says, we didn't know what was going on, but whatever it was, it just popped in out of nowhere, pointed up at us, and everybody is now pointing at us. And he said, so we figured we better just get out of here. He said, when we turned around, it was standing behind us. That thing which was down there was already behind us. That's how quick it moved. He said, when we turned around to run, there was a reptile alien standing behind us. He said this thing was at least 7 to 7.5 foot, to maybe 8 foot tall, had a reptile man's head, but it was a reptile head. It was very muscular, looked like a human body on the ordinary of a human body, but a reptile body, extremely muscular. And he said, and it was looking at us, and he said, it cast some kind of a spell on us so that the children and the women, no one could move. We were like frozen. And he said, and even nobody could say anything, nobody could cry, nobody could run, nobody could do anything. And he said, we were staring at it, and it was looking at us, but it had control over us. It had locked us so that we couldn't move, we couldn't scream, we couldn't do anything. And he said, and this thing was gazing at all of us, looking at the children, looking at the women. He said, this reptile alien, and he says, we're just Christians in a church. But we saw a reptile alien. This thing was not of this world. And he said this thing was looking at all of us. And then he said it looked at the men, and the look he gave us, we understood. He didn't say anything, but we knew. He was saying, I'm going to leave you alone. But when I leave here, you better get out of here. And he said, then And he said the alien walked over like he was leaving, is gone. Just like they was gone. And he said when he was gone, the moment he was gone, everyone came back to life. And the babies were screaming, the women were yelling, screaming. Everybody came back to life instantly. And he says, we ran like we were totally out of our minds, running back to the cars. We ran down the hill, got in the cars, and the women were screaming, the children were yelling, and he says, and we drove back, and he said it was the most incredible, horrible experience. And he says, all the guys in my office will tell you, we saw a reptile alien in Colorado. So when you're talking about, he says, so when you're talking about reptile aliens in the ancient world, I got news for you. There's one we know for sure in Colorado. We saw him. And he said, this thing ran back and it went so fast, it was just, it's gone. But that's how fast it came up behind us. We knew that we'd been spotted. We turned around and it was too late. It's already standing here. And he said, so when I hear tales now about people who have seen reptile aliens, I got to tell you, there's 6 families here. We all belong to the same church, and I will guarantee you, we saw one. You can bet on it. So, and this is and I found out because I started asking questions when I was in Vegas about this man and his company. And yes, he's a very wealthy man and a very, very big company, well known in Las Vegas for buying and selling the hotels and big properties. And he said, yeah, I'm just telling you what happened to us.
And my suspicion, which may well be yours as well,
Say it again.
My suspicion, and it may well be yours as well, is that for every person who comes forward and reports a story, there are 100 others who don't.
Oh, I'm probably right. You're probably right.
Maybe 1,000 others who don't, because who's going to come forward publicly and say a story like that? Not many.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons, of course, why I want to encourage you to, why I have been supporting you in coming forward to tell the stories, not only to support David Icke, but it's to support other people to have had these experiences, because I suspect that they are fairly widespread and nobody wants to talk about it.
Well, you're right.
That's my guess.
Did you ever talk to Dr. Roger Lear about his case up in Bakersfield?
I don't believe so. I know Roger Lear,
Yeah.
and he's a very good man. I don't think I know about the Bakersfield incident. Tell me about it.
Well, I'm just trying to remember the story basically. If he were here, he would give you the real dope on it. But I'm just remembering the basic story is that there was a guy up in Bakersfield who is a fire investigator. He's a fireman investigator for the fire department. And he has been having reptile aliens coming into his bedroom. Him and his wife have had reptile aliens, he says, were coming into his bedroom. They didn't harm him, but he said, he was telling Dr. Lear, because he called Roger Lear, because Roger is noted for his work with aliens and
Implants.
implants. And so Roger went up to see him, and this guy's with the fire department as an investigator, arson investigator for the fire department. And he said that the guy was saying that at night him and his wife were in bed, and the wall facing them became like water. It looked like water, and reptile aliens walked through. And when they came through, then the wall came back up to a wall again. And he said that they stood there looking at him and walking around the room. And he said, we were so frightened out of our wits. We were just watching these reptile aliens walking around in the bedroom. And he said, then we feel this strange feeling again, and the wall becomes like a water. And I think it's interesting that that's the way, what is it, Star Trek or whatever it is, the wall looks like water. Well, this is a long time ago. This guy was talking, this is a long time ago. And and he said the aliens will walk back through again. So he said, so what they decided to do was they got a towel, large, big towels which were the same color as the carpet. And I'm just trying to remember all of this from the experience, but they glued on the back or taped on the back aluminum foil, about 6 or 8 sheets of aluminum foil over and over on top of each other, and taped them on the towel and laid it back over. So the idea was is that anything coming through that wall will not see the towel because it's the same color as the floor, and will walk, and the impression will be on the aluminum foil to prove that there was something in that room. And he said, and sure enough, these things come back. On a few days later, they came back and walked through and walked around and looked at him and her in the bed, and then walked back over and walked back through the wall again. And he said, I've got them. They stepped on the carpet, on the towel. And he said, yeah, and they pick it up and you could see the imprint of the foot, the 3, I think he said there was like 3 fingers on the foot. And yet there was a piece of the nail was caught in the carpet. And they took that piece of nail and they called Dr. Lear and showed it to him. And they've had that little piece of a nail sent to, I don't know, Los Alamos or one of those big research laboratories, government research labs. And they said that this was, it was still alive. It was still living. It was a living tissue, and it was still alive. And that it was seemed to be growing. When they got it, as opposed to where it was now, it's grown in length, so it seems to be growing, even though it's not connected to the body. It's still growing. And so that's just one more story about a reptile aliens.
Did they get any analysis of what this... was this in the days of DNA tests when they could...
Well, yeah, you know what? He was just telling me this off the cuff, you know, and he didn't go into much, because I guess we were talking about reptile aliens. He said, well, you know, I'm just having some investigation of something's going on right now up in Bakersfield. But they did get a footprint on the aluminum foil to show that there was something came through the wall, whatever it was. So
these are, yeah, you're just confirming that these aren't apparitions. They're physical.
These apparitions actually have weight.
They have weight. Yeah, they have weight.
Because they came through the wall, and their imprint is on the aluminum foil.
Yeah, and they have some kind of interdimensional capability.
Exactly, they have interdimensional capabilities that come through and walk back into.
You may remember that in the Project Camelot interview with you in September 2009, I believe I shared the story with you that was told to me by Barbara Lamb. And Barbara Lamb...
I know Barbara well.
...is a very lovely lady.
Yeah, very.
Who is a counselor and a supporter to many people who've had very strange ET experiences. And she told me how a reptilian alien had appeared out of nowhere in her bedroom and had silently held her hand for 2 minutes before it disappeared again, looking into her eyes, communicating with her that it was friendly. And it had been specially bred to interact with humans, to give them the message that not all reptilians were hostile and meant harm. And this was this being's purpose, and it communicated with Barbara in that way. And so, just to confuse the issue further, I feel honor bound to report that little story too, because we mustn't let our prejudices get the worst of us.
No, you're right.
And with that little anecdote of my own, or with Barbara's, let us say, I'm going to very gently close this down, because we're now at the end of our 3rd hour of tape. It is 3:45 in the morning. Even Jordan's getting tired. I'm exhausted. We both came back from the Vatican just a few days ago.
Yeah, we went to the Vatican.
And that's another story. And poor Jordan doesn't even know if he's going to be able to get home or not, because we've got a volcano in Iceland that's doing its thing. Because the whole solar system is going into something or other that's activating the Earth. And that's another story too. So it's all happening around here. And in the closing seconds of this tape, Jordan, I want to thank you so much for putting all of this on record, because We haven't been talking about the Illuminati and the New World Order this time, but we've been talking about a different area which is possibly even more important
Far more important.
in terms of sketching out the big picture of which we here on planet Earth may be quite a small part. And my own conviction is that you have certainly had an important role here, not only to reveal occult knowledge that has been kept secret from us, but actually to be a communicator about all these subjects, because they're all connected. They're all connected.
Absolutely
You have
all
to
connected.
Understand it all.
Yeah.
And we're into the closing seconds here. I feel like I'm just about to be whisked off the stage, and I want to thank you again on behalf of the hundreds
you.
of thousands of people who'll be watching this. So thank you, Jordan Maxwell.
Thank you. Been fun.
It's a wild ride.
No doubt about that.